Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Why Can't We Be Friends? We are in partnership with GTX Connect, as well as Dell Medical Community Driven Initiatives. This is the month of April, and this month we are covering the topic of PTSD in veterans. And I wanted to draw everyone's attention to the chat box where we're going to go ahead and put a link for our Slido application. It's very easy to use. You click on the link, you type in if you have any questions that you would like for our panelists to ask this evening, to answer this evening. Or you can vote for questions that other people have asked, and that can bump it up in the level of priority. So feel free to click on that link and check out those questions. And with that, we're going to have our panelists go ahead and introduce themselves.
My name is Tim Frere. I'm a 12-year Army veteran, was an infantryman for 9 of those years, spent 42 months in Iraq and Afghanistan, and diagnosed with PTSD. After I got out, I kind of wandered around, mostly because of the PTSD, and now I actually work for a behavioral health nonprofit called the Samaritan Center in Austin.
Thank you, Tim.
So my name is OJ Taylor, 4-year vet. Wasn't really deployed, as much as some of my fellow vets, just to Korea. But prior to joining the military, I actually had a background in counseling and kind of the mental health field. So when I got out, I wanted to, just either work with vets or vulnerable, teens or youth as much as possible. So I'm currently, doing the vulnerable teens and youth and kind of volunteer with vets whenever I get a chance, located in Hutto, Texas currently.
Great, thank you, OJ. And then Andy looks like he is tending to his dog now. I'm just kidding. Hey, Andy, you're up.
Hi, my name is Andres Martinez. I served in the Army for 13 years. I did 4 deployments, 3 in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. I got out. Alcohol was my issue, and I self-diagnosed with alcohol, self-medicated with alcohol, and I have PTSD confirmed. And I also live in Hutto, and right now I just currently got a new place, and I got my dog. He's my service dog. His name is Chief, and I don't work right now, but I graduated HVAC, 9-month school, so I'm HVAC qualified, and I'm just taking it day by day, really.
Great, thank you, Andy. Okay, so this is the part where I just kind of click over and see where we're at with questions. We have quite a few questions to start with. And like I was saying, I don't know if Andy had heard me say this earlier or if I didn't repeat it. If there are any questions that you do not want to answer, you don't have to answer them. But this is the whole point of this, is that it's an open space to have honest conversations. So even if you don't have something nice to say, it's okay to say it here. Like everybody we're all, that's like the point, is to have kind of like a very, honest and open conversation and get answers that maybe people wouldn't be able to ask or get if they don't have a friend or a family member that they could ask these questions to. So it's supposed to be conversational, you know what I mean? So with that, I am going to start with the questions. And the first question is, and I don't know if everyone here is even working with a VA, but it says, do you think the VA is doing a good job in terms of mental health for services with people with PTSD? So do you think the VA is doing a good job in helping to manage this for you personally? And anybody can go first.
I will say that over the last 7 years, 8 years since I got out, there's been a huge turnaround. That I think the VA is doing a much better job now than they were in 2014 or 2015. Not only do you have the vet centers, which is focused on veterans who post 9/11, but then you also have like PTSD clinics. For instance, Austin VA has a PTSD clinic, and all of the therapists or counselors in that office are all strictly focused on working with veterans with PTSD. So I would say there's a huge improvement then from what there used to be.
Thank you. Would anybody else?
I would agree that the VA has had a huge turnaround. You know, like I recently reached out to the VA. It's if you want help, you gotta ask for it. I mean, no one can read your mind. No one can know. They can see signs out. They can just ask you, hey, go get help. But if you don't want the help, it's on them. Like I would say, like the wait to actually talk to somebody, it's kind of long but I understand that there's so many people coming in, and like I said, that the Austin VA, there's one that is Cedar Park VA also. That's when I go to, but for mental health, PTSD, and this and that, I go South Austin, and talk to my. They can either do by Zoom, or you can do a phone call, or you can do it personally. You can do walk-ins. I mean, but I would say what I'm dealing with now, it's they've helped me to talking to somebody, finding somebody to talk to, and you can message the VA on a secure net, tell them, hey, I'm trying to schedule an appointment, and they'll call you right there and then, and they'll give you all the openings available for that doctor. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm going through. But back then, it's like the VA was not what it is now, should I say?
And I guess to kind of piggyback off both what Andy and Tim both were saying, I do think it's gotten better over the years, especially in some of the bigger cities, the Austins of the world. But one of the issues is, not all vets actually live in these bigger cities and have access to, as many resources. So kind of the vets, I'm from a small town in Georgia, so the vets who we have in these smaller towns, I think it's kind of harder for them to get access to a lot of these programs and resources, just for them not knowing, or just not having the, access granted to them because of the barriers with the small towns or whatnot. So while it is growing, I think it just kind of needs to branch out and, reach some of the vets who aren't in some of the bigger cities nationwide.
Yeah, I guess that's, something to consider. I mean, we live in such a metropolitan kind of conglomeration. It's either, you're in Austin or you're in one of these sub communities. So the resources here are probably significantly better than in a lot of other places. But that is something to consider. My cat has joined the Zoom presentation. We'll see how that works out for us. And here comes the dog. Okay, so I see there's a couple, somebody had voted on one of these questions, but I see a question at the bottom that I think would be kind of a good precursor to that. So the one that would be the precursor for the one that was voted on was, for you individually, what does having the diagnosis of PTSD mean? So, there might be, PTSD is obviously talked about a lot, like it's kind of, people hear that collection of letters a lot, but I think sometimes people might not know exactly what that means for the person who has it, or, how the symptoms can kind of vary from person to person. So I will let you guys answer that one.
Well, for me, the reason why I have PTSD is because of the combat I've seen. 4 tours, each tour got harder. Each tour got harder, and I was gone every other year. Every other year was gone. and just being in combat, and seeing stuff that normal people shouldn't see. You know what I mean? But that's my job. That was my job title. Dealing with it, it's hard because I can be in my moods. I'll be funny guy, friendly, this and that, and then I can snap real quick. You know what I mean? So not only my PTSD, but I also got diagnosed with bipolar. You know what I mean? It's like more after more after more, and it's hard because your loved ones have to deal with it too. And like my PTSD has ruined relationships. My alcoholism has ruined relationships. But that's just how I self-medicated. I was like, I'm not gonna worry about it. But guess what? You wake up and then the problems are still there. So me seeking help is helping me. And then I got friends that that can see a difference in me, my changes, and my behaviors. Hey, you okay? Take my medications to help me cope with the depression, anxiety, all other stuff. And majority of the time, I can act like nothing's wrong with me, but you can't. Like PTSD, I have combat, but I understand that PTSD is just not on combat. People have growing up with PTSD because it's but life events what causes this. You don't wake up, oh, I got PTSD. You know what I mean? It's life events that cause you to have a trauma. And mine was happened to be combat. I had a good childhood. I had my parents, everything, and then I was good. Each deployment, I was good. But in reality, when I got out, and I wasn't doing the same stuff I was doing, I wasn't good. So I seeked help, and sure enough, they 100%, 100% PTSD was what they gave me. And I was like, well, now it's up to me to control it. That's what it is. It's on the person individually. I feel that there's ways to control it. How do you control it? And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes I can't control it sometimes. But just trying to keep myself busy, my dog and all that stuff. It's just take my medication and just not think about it and take it day by day. That's all I can. And that's what I've been doing.
Thank you.
So the question, what does it mean to me? What I think the start with is looking at what the first three letters, post-traumatic stress, and understanding. It took me a while to kind of put that all together. I assumed that because of my job, I was supposed to be angry all the time. And being in the military, it's the drinking is absolutely a part of that culture. So I think once I removed myself from there, I realized, okay, hold on. Let's look at what I dealt with and realize, because my dad was in the Army. So I would tell him things and he would go, yep, no, those aren't things that people normally experience. So just understanding what it was and that what I was seeing had not been normal, and realizing that it was causing me to be deregulated almost constantly, whether that was racing hard, sweating, all of these other kinds of things. It was finally understanding that and now working towards combating those, I guess, the triggers and the symptoms that come from it.
So OJ, did you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I think kind of Tim and Andy both hit some of the points that I was gonna make, and I think they kind of did a great job of covering it. For me, it's just what it means to me is pretty much a battle every day, an ongoing battle. Like Andy touched on, people think of PTSD and they automatically think of combat or war or something like that. And even though it may be a battle, it may have nothing to do with that aspect of things. People have PTSD from a number of reasons. childhood, just certain things that, nobody can ever touch on. So it's pretty much just an ongoing battle and finding a way to find that balance and try to, work on getting through that battle essentially.
Thank you. So the follow-up question from that would be, what do you want people to know about living with PTSD? And that can be just like a little synopsis of, what you would like. We call it, where I'm from, we call it the elevator speech, but what you would want people to know about living with PTSD.
You would just want them to know that it's not, it's not a charted path as far as like, you really can't predict how things are going to go. You may wake up one day and for whatever reason, just be in a mood. Like Andy stated earlier, sometimes, it's ruined relationships, it's ruined friendships. So it's just, learning to sympathize and empathize with the person who has it and understand that some things you'll never understand, but you kind of just try to be that support system that they may need during that time.
The biggest thing I think I see it all the time is PTSD doesn't mean what TV tells you it means. I think a lot of times you'll see on TV shows, anything like that. Oh, you hear the words PTSD, and it's always a crazy veteran who is shooting or doing something like that. And that's not it. It's, I mean, because again, as both of the other gentlemen have mentioned, it doesn't have to be just from combat. So just, I think that's the biggest thing, is understanding that those words don't mean what TV tells us.
Andy, did you have anything to add to that?
I mean, they pretty much hit it on the nail in the coffin. It's just, if knowing that someone has PTSD, like, be there. Don't add more stress than they already have stress. You know what I mean? We're not gonna be easy to live with. It's like I said, it's an ongoing battle every day. Every day it's a battle. Waking up, it's a battle. Going to sleep, it's a battle to go to sleep. But just like I just watch their moods. You know what I mean? Once you start recognizing certain stuff that people with PTSD have, you start recognizing their mood swings, and you're gonna recognize what they do, like when they pass windows or making sure everything's locked or just stuff like that. It'll be little things, but it's the little things that matter. You know what I mean? Be patient, and just like I said, I always said, be a good support system. That's really what it boils down to.
So Andy, I heard you say earlier that you were in recovery. I'm also in recovery. We did an episode of Why Can't We Be Friends once, and it was about addiction and recovery. And I was just curious as to how long you have been in recovery.
Well, I'm trying to get back into it. I was once 3.5 years sober, and that's when I was living in New York, Albany, New York. And then my mom had passed away, and my mom was like my biggest support system. She was like my biggest fan. She was like my best friend. She knew everything, all my drama. My mom knew. You know what I mean? And when she passed away, that was like half my heart was gone. So I went, like I said, I went back to self-medicated, and now it's like, I don't like, I don't really drink as much as I used to. You know what I mean? I'll have a few, and sometimes I'll overdo it. You know what I mean? But like now, I'm just trying to be a healthier me, a better me, a better version for my kids too. Because you know, I got my kids in my world, and I gotta protect them, and I can't protect them if I'm not healthy enough to protect them.
Yeah.
So
Well, and recovery looks different for everyone. So,
yes,
you know, yeah.
right.
So, because that was the next question is, do you think that alcohol addiction and drug addiction are big problems for veterans who are experiencing PTSD? And since Andy had already kind of talked about it a little bit, I thought I would lead with that. So would anybody else like to answer that question as well? Or Andy, do you have anything additional that you wanted to say?
I mean, that's what we know to go to, self-medicate. What can make my feelings go away? But then all you're doing is delaying the problem. It'll be gone there and then, but when you wake up all hungover and this and that, the problem is still there. And we have to finally realize, I finally realized that, you know, sometimes I'm the problem. It's not everybody else. I'm the problem. So I need to fix me. And you know, I never did drugs like opiates. I stayed away from those. My main thing was alcohol. And me knowing that, it's just I'm trying to cut back a lot. Now, I'll have some here and there, but a lot of people with PTSD, they self-medicate with alcohol and drugs. That's the sad truth. You know what I mean? And you'll see it because alcohol, it wears your body down, makes you older than you really are. You know what I mean? So I'm just trying to be me, basically.
I would say, yeah, I agree that it is very, prevalent. It's right there. But a big part of that is not only because of, self-medicating and things like that, but at least in the Army, there's the culture is almost revolves around drinking. You're fighting or you're drinking. And so when that's kind of, when you look at unit events, there's always going to be booze at those unit events. And so it's almost, you've built up this, like the thought process where that's just what you're supposed to do. And it continues. And then the VA has gotten better about it. But a lot of the issues that I have seen in the past was veterans were getting prescribed extremely, strong medications and then basically just cutting it off. And then they went to what they could find to fill that gap or to fill what they were missing. And so that was pretty prevalent from what I have seen, friends and, guys that were in units with me.
OJ, did you have anything to add to that?
I mean, not really. Just like, both the battles said before, the accessibility and the whole, easiness as far as that's the one thing that it seems that's, that comes, easy enough to get your hands on. So that's what people tend to turn towards to, drown their sorrow, so to speak. But yeah, as far as, Andy did a great job of kind of telling his own personal story, as well as Tim, as far as telling the stigma of how military life is. So they kind of hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, and the culture of drinking. So my family is military. My dad is a Vietnam veteran and he has PTSD. And I'm a survivor of domestic violence and was diagnosed with PTSD about, I guess, 9 years ago. And that was also around the time that I started self-medicating, right? And when we talk about this culture of drinking, it's definitely more so even in the military, but even just in American culture in general, the accessibility, the availability, your set messages that like, if you can handle this, then you're fine, or it's okay to do this to unwind or relax. But then when you start that self-medication process, you don't realize that your body is going to get to a point where it's physically dependent on that, and you couldn't stop if you wanted to, right? Because the entire organism has been taken over by that. And so I can relate a lot to a lot of those things. And I do think that even from my own personal experiences with it, and knowing what I know about my dad's experiences, that the culture of drinking, if we think it's bad in just like our typical American society, think of that and then times it times 10. It's just, and my dad was an officer, going to officer events and all of those kinds of things. I mean, there was never not alcohol involved, right? So it's definitely a big part of it. I'm going to click over to the questions. We've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'll go ahead and ask it because it's at the very top. And I just kind of mentioned some stuff too. Do you think military or combat related PTSD is different from other populations with PTSD? So we were talking, you guys have brought up that there are, people who've experienced childhood trauma that have PTSD. There are people who have survived domestic violence that have PTSD. Some people have survived things like an event, like a fire or something, that have PTSD. And do you guys think that there is a difference between the combat related versus some of the other ones?
I'd just say, working with the population that I've worked with, from experience, that even though you may have different triggers, it's still essentially the same battles, because it prevents you, it kind of hinders you from living a normal life per se. So while one person, it may be, combat related, for somebody else, it may be something tied to a childhood traumatic past that kind of still prevents them from, leading their life on a regular daily basis. So while it may not be the same events, it still hinders all parties from, living a, that kind of normal life, so to speak. So I don't think, one outweighs the other anymore, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. At times I think, like that childhood trauma, or even when you're looking at a car accident, when you've gone to combat, that something's going to happen. But you have other folks who, even like I said, with a car accident, you don't expect to be in a car accident, and kids are in the same boat. So yeah, I don't think there's any difference at all. But again, I think that's where that stigma comes, like I was talking about earlier with TV, is it always focuses on just the military PTSD, because that's what's in the news. But I think there's a lot more than just that.
All right. Let's see. The next question is, are you getting any relief from any of the treatments that you are receiving? And I think that, that can also be, are you getting relief from the treatments that you are receiving? And maybe like, where do you feel like you are at in your recovery journey from PTSD, like right now?
So I was originally officially diagnosed in 2007. So, I mean, since then, I've gone into counseling multiple times. And all sorts of different kinds of modalities. But I'm doing it again now. And before that, it was 3 years ago that for about a year. And before that, it's like this constant thing. I probably should have just kept going, but you get to a point where you're like, okay, I feel better. And then you stop. But then things start coming back. And now I think I'm old enough to realize when that's happening. I'm like, okay, before anything gets real silly, let's just go back right now. So yeah, it works, yes. But I think a lot of times just with the understanding that knowing yourself, that if things start coming back up, that you're willing and able to get back into some sort of treatment.
So Andy, do you have anything you want to share with us about where you feel like you are right now in your recovery journey and what treatments have helped you? Or if any treatments have helped you?
Like I said, I went to rehab for intense rehab for 7 months, and that helped me get sober for 3 years. But at the beginning of it, it's like there's people out there having bigger problems than me. You know what I mean? I'm just here for drinking, but drinking is a drug. I guess they consider it a drug also. A drug is a drug is a drug. And when I went to counseling and I was hearing other stories, I was just like, I don't relate to their stories. And once I started talking about my experiences, everybody looks at me like a deer in the headlights. Like, look. So once I feel that, it makes me shut down. Like, you know what? You don't understand you don't understand me. You don't understand what I've been through, this and that. And it's so the only person that will understand you is a person that's been in your shoes. So the VA group chats and groups and that help you, because even old veterans from Vietnam, right? They tell their stories. Oh, you know, I can relate to you. I can relate to you. It's all about relating to somebody. Once you relate to somebody, then you start getting more stuff off your chest, and you feel like, oh man, like the weight's getting lifted up, because you're finally opening up and talking to somebody that understands exactly what you're talking about. And it's the deer in headlights for me that just makes me shut down. I mean, and that's like that's why I never really talked about my past experiences in when I was in a relationship. I never told her what I've been through, this and that, because once I started, I got the deer in the headlights, so I just stopped. I was like, you're not gonna understand. So, but it's being able to find someone that you can relate to in any PTSD. I mean, because PTSD is PTSD, no matter how you can relate to somebody in a group that will help you out more, basically.
OJ, did you have anything to add about that, or want to make a statement about where you feel like you are in your recovery?
Well, for me personally, I'm actually not diagnosed with PTSD, but I'm around, a population that is, and I'm around a bunch of my friends, actually. We were all military buddies, so a lot of them have been in longer, or continue to be in. Like I said, with me coming in with a background in counseling, for me, it's just a matter of trying to do exactly what Andy said, be able to relate to somebody, know where they're coming from, and having that military background, kind of being able to just be more of more of a laid back presence that more veterans feel comfortable talking to, because they, kind of know that I kind of understand at least where they're coming from, and have that knowledge and that research to be able to help them as much as I can.
So we were discussing before we started recording and before we had opened it up to the larger audience, and OJ works with basically a homeless, disenfranchised, unhoused youth population in Austin. And I've worked with similar populations, and I can tell you, I mean, you already know this, but those kids don't get there, and it didn't happen because everything went right, right? So the majority of the kids you're going to be working with are all going to be experiencing some level of PTSD. So, you know, you working in that particular area is a lot of exposure for that kind of thing. And Tim does some similar work, but yeah. So I'm trying to, let's see what the next question was. What therapies, blah, 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 blah. What is your experience trying to rejoin civilian life with PTSD or other lingering issues after, you know, military combat or just being in the military or whatever that looks like? So trying to rejoin civilian life.
It was really hard. I mean, for me, that transition, I grew up, my dad retired from the Army the day I graduated high school. I transitioned over into the military. And then I had to get out on a family care discharge because I became a single dad. And so I got about a month notice basically that I was going to be out. So I went from what I had been doing for the last 12 years. Next month you're going to not be in the Army anymore. And then I was out. And so there was a whole lot. I probably would have had all sorts of issues even if I wasn't dealing with PTSD as well, because I was just completely lost. I did not know what to do. But I got into VA, started talking to folks and realizing that, again, what both have already mentioned is finding people to relate to. That was what really helped bring me around, is talking to people who had already done the same thing and getting, you know, not necessarily guidance, but getting their story really helped me kind of, you know, get straight, I guess, you know, get things put together for myself.
Well, for me, when I got out, I was, like he said, I was lost too, because we're so used to the structure. You know, you got PT at this time, you have an hour break after that, then you have formation, then everything formation is put out, what's all got to be done that day. And that was like everyday life for me for 13 years. It was a structure. Now, to the civilian life, you're like, okay, what do I do? Oh, I have nothing to do today. So you just find something to do, basically. And then with PTSD, it's like, oh, I'm gonna go to the bar then, you know, and you know, I get in fights and all this stuff. So it just, the anger comes out. It's just a whole different Andy comes out, and it just, the transition, like I said, it was hard. Like he said, it was hard, but it's just like just being able to adapt and overcome. You know what I'm saying? Just find something that brings you joy and happiness. And like a lot of veterans that have kids, and the kids are the pride and joy like mine. So just being able to deal with it. I'm living life on life's terms anyway. You know what I mean? And we never know when's gonna be our last. You know, we just gotta make the best of it.
So I guess for me, and maybe, you know, Tim and Andy, I'm not sure how it was for them when they were getting out. I feel like if, you know, them serving longer tenures, you know, 10 years plus, it's a lot harder transitioning into the civilian world. At the same time, I also feel like nowadays, I think the military is trying to do better, but they didn't really put have services in place to help veterans make that transition from, you know, Army to civilian. I mean, they give you classes that you have to take essentially to get a checklist checked off so you can pretty much out process. But as far as setting veterans up for success, they're doing a much better job now, you know, hosting job fairs and resume writing classes and things like that. But for sure, back when, you know, the older vets were getting out, they didn't have any of these services in place. So it made it, you know, a lot harder for them to transition. Me only being in 4 years and having a lot of those practices already in place, kind of, you know, my transition to getting out, I essentially had everything lined up as far as job wise and everything 2 months, you know, in advance of me getting out. But not every veteran, especially the ones who've been in, you know, that tenure and not used to having that transition, it makes it a lot harder for them in particular.
So I've been listening to you guys talk, and especially when Andy talks, some of the stuff he says is like recovery language. I'm like, oh, I know all that stuff. But it's interesting talking about PTSD and the trauma, and what we're experiencing right now in the recovery community is a huge influx of nurses. And it's just, I mean, there were already quite a few nurses in, you know, the program anyway, but now with the pandemic and all of the things that people have been experiencing in hospitals, it's very interesting. And it's kind of nice though, because every time we get a nurse, we're like, oh, we've got 4 more nurses. We got you covered, right? Because they all understand what it's like to be, you know, to go through a pandemic and be a nurse in an ER or in that situation. So they've all had their own like kind of little group. And it kind of reminded me about what you guys were saying with, you know, looking for people who can specifically understand some of those things in particular. Sometimes it's just understanding PTSD in general, but sometimes it's also nice when they can really understand the particulars of it. And like Andy said, like not have that kind of deer in the headlights look on their faces or not being able to relate. But I just think it's really interesting in talking about the topic of PTSD. So if you've got friends or family members that are nurses and have made it through this pandemic, you might want to say hi and check on them and see how they're doing. Because it was a lot worse than anything I had ever, you know, it sounded like some of the same stuff my dad would talk about when he talked about combat stuff. And I was just like, okay, this is a big deal. And I just wanted to kind of throw that out there in general for you guys, for me, for the audience. So since we are talking about PTSD, there's a couple more questions on here. We have about 15 minutes left, so I think that's plenty of time. There's one person who wanted to know, like particularly what symptoms some people are experiencing in particular. So like for me, I know mine was a lot of anxiety and nightmares, right? And when you have nightmares, it makes it difficult to sleep. If you have difficulty sleeping, it affects everything you do. And that leveling of anxiety, which kind of led to the self-medication aspect of it, right? But people want to know what the primary symptoms for you guys in your PTSD have been.
Number one is anxiety. I mean, if I get going, I can't. Most times, if me and my wife try to go out to eat at a restaurant, a lot of times I actually won't eat at all. I'll just get my food, put it in the to-go box, and leave, because my anxiety is so bad that I'm actually physically nauseous, that I can't even eat. So that for me, that's the biggest one. I don't have to deal with nightmares because I can't even tell you when the last time I had a dream was, or at least that I don't remember dreams, but I wake up a lot at night, typically 3 to 4 times a night. And usually I'm up for good by 5. And that's not because I want to be, it's just because that's it. Yep. And irritability would be the other one.
I think mine's also anxiety. it's tough to deal with, man. Like he said, when I go eat somewhere, I like my back gotta be against the wall because I always feel like someone's looking at me or someone's gonna get me. Just like little stuff like walking by windows. I kind of every once in a while I'll like duck under a window. It's just a habit that I encountered. You know what I mean? And I hate being around large crowds. I can't do it. I just feel like I'm suffocated, and I gotta stay away from large crowds. I don't really like people, and I'm a people person. When it comes down to it, I really don't like people. It's just, but I play the part. You know what I mean? I get along fine with a lot of people, but if I can avoid large crowds, isn't it? I'll do it. It's all about self-peace for me.
Okay, so we have another one on here talking about the 4th of July holiday. So people are wanting to know, does that particular holiday impact your PTSD? Do you know other people that it impacts them? Or what is your experience like of that? Go ahead, Andy.
Like my job in the Army was artillery, so I blew stuff up. You know what I mean? that's basically what that was my job. I go blow stuff up. That was my job. So, like, and I get it. Some veterans don't like 4th of July. Please don't pop around this area. Me, I'm like, hey, y'all be sensitive. That's my personal opinion. I was like, man, y'all being a little too sensitive. It's fireworks. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. But like, I love fireworks. Like, my kids love fireworks. I grew up to fireworks, and even to this day I still pop fireworks because it brings like a little kid out of me. I was like, oh yeah, bar rocket, let's go, boom. I don't mind fireworks at all. I mean, I got tinnitus anyway, so it don't matter to me. You know what I mean? It doesn't bother me at all.
How about you, Tim?
Yeah, the same. I mean, I'm 40. 4th of July has been the same for the last 40 years. So yeah, I think it kind of drives me crazy because I've seen someone who had one of those be courteous of veterans, and they were leaving their house with their firearms to go to the range. And I'm like, it's kind of the same thing, man. So yeah.
Yeah, my dad has never, of all the things that he has complained about as somebody who has PTSD, fireworks has never been one of them. But that's not to say that there aren't some people that maybe that impacts. So I thought that was interesting. I totally forgot about that until somebody put it in the questions. Let's see. So here's a good one that I think maybe could apply to everyone in general. What additional supports or programs could be offered to people who are recovering from PTSD? So anybody who's recovering from PTSD, like OJ, even people in your program, are there program gaps that you think could help them? Stuff like that.
I definitely think there's, information that can be distributed to give everybody a better insight. I think, more resource centers can be set up to help vets. Not everybody is kind of into the, sit in a circle, kumbaya type deal. So I think it can be more active events that can kind of, get vets going, facilitated, and maybe, kind of help them cope with things differently, other than just sitting and, talking about it in like an AA type setting, which, takes a little more work, obviously, but I definitely think if people wanted to kind of facilitate that and dive in deep and find out, what really interested some of the vets, they can kind of get some events set up to get more people to join and be more effective.
So it sounds like it would be helpful if people would get a little bit more creative with their solutions. And it seems like we are in an opportune time at this time in history with everything kind of being so crazy in the last 2 or 3 years. Like, if not now, be creative when, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this is the perfect opportunity to do things differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Andy? Can you think of any service gaps? You have a service animal. I don't know how widely available those are to everyone. I don't know if the VA helped you in that journey of getting your service animal. What do you think?
Well, for me, if you want help, you gotta go get it. You gotta want it. A lot of vets out there that don't know that there's so many programs out there for vets. There's a lot of programs out there for vets. You just gotta network, ask questions. You know what I mean? And I'm pretty sure there's people be out there that there's stuff for this veterans and this and that, blah blah blah. But it's just the fact of stop being lazy and go find it. Like they can help you get a house. They can help you pay your bills. They can put food. They can put food in your fridge and cover medical, this and that. And it's like me, for everything I got to the VA, I asked questions and I went to it. I was like, nah. I was like, I'm not gonna get out and not do nothing. So I went to the VA. I asked questions and I enrolled myself. They gave me a doctor. I have my own doctor now, and it's just the fact of if you don't know, ask. My dog did that.
That's okay. So really just kind of being proactive.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of services for veterans out there. It's just the fact of you have to look for it, and everybody's got Google, right? Everybody has internet, and like when you drive around downtown, this and that, and you see people asking for money, and you sit and they use the signs, "I'm a veteran, I'm a veteran." And just like me, it baffles me. I was like, man, if you're a veteran, bro, you go get help. But I see that. I was like, either you're veteran or not veteran, I'll give them money. I was like, here, man, here you go. Thanks for your service. That's just me. I mean, they can be lying. I'm a veteran, but do I know that? No. Some people that know I'm a veteran because people I talk to that know, he served. And like I said, I looked for all the help. I was down. I was homeless one time in New York when I got out of the Army. And I went to the VA and they helped me pay 3 months rent on my house. They got me back on my feet. But I just asked people, where can I go? I'm a veteran. And that's really what it is. You have to ask. If you don't know, ask. A lot of people out there that have knowledge of stuff, you just have to find it. I mean, and then like they got Veterans Day. There's so many events on Veterans Day for veterans. You know what I mean? And we eat for free too at places. That's why we hop places for free food. You know what I mean? Hey, Veterans Day, I'll take it. I'll get my free chicken wings. You know what I mean, or something. But it's just the fact of just ask, really.
So Kirby Lane Cafe year round has 50% off for veterans and law enforcement officers. Just heads up. And then Tim, did you have anything to add to that?
Really, I mean, when I think of the best way to help is continuing to do things like this, to continue breaking and destroying that stigma that's there. Because what I see because one of the programs that we have is actually at the Travis County State Jail, or, you know, we work with some of the rehabilitation centers, things like that. And a lot of the veterans are older and they don't want to admit that there's a problem, because it's, you know, as a kid, I remember hearing it, and I know it was before me, you know, going, you know, that's its weakness. And I think that's the biggest thing that would really help everyone, is to break that stigma and understand that it's okay. You know, if you have a problem, it's okay to have a problem. It's okay to feel, you know, to have this going on and to go get help. But again, we really need to keep pushing that idea of breaking the stigma behind it.
The stigma, and also just kind of assumptions, because even as somebody with PTSD, I have found myself thinking, you know, and being a child of someone who served in the military, a military brat, growing up on military bases, that kind of thing, you know, there have been times that I'm like, do I even have PTSD, really? Because I didn't go to war. I didn't do this. So, I mean, even in our own little PTSD community, we sometimes question and isolate. And I'm not isolating myself from nurses or kids with, you know, people who had childhood traumas. The people that I tend to isolate mentally from are veterans, because I feel like it's just so for a civilian, so difficult to wrap our brains around, right? But the reality is, it is all the same, you know, and we do have something very profound in common, and it's okay for people to feel that connection with each other. Like, you know, because we all ultimately know what it feels like to live with something like this every day, and to be in recovery from it, and to struggle with it. And, you know, it is a lifelong thing, you know, and Tim, you touched on that when you talked about, well, you know, I went some time and then I got a year of therapy, and then I went some more time and then I got a year of therapy. And, you know, and it's kind of like this constant monitoring and kind of housekeeping, you know, um, and, and Andy touched on it too, you know, significant life events can really, they're already difficult, right? But the death of a mother, or the death of a close significant other, can really impact us in ways that can exacerbate, you know, a lot of those issues. Um, and the stigmatization of it, you know, it does need to be something that is addressed and reduced, but especially in the veteran population, you know, and that whole idea of weakness and mental health is not as important as physical health, and on all of that kind of thing. So I agree with you. So we're on the hour now. Is there anything that anybody feels like, I'm surprised they didn't ask this question, or it's interesting that we didn't touch on this? Is there anything anybody wants to add to this conversation tonight, or give people food for thought for the future? We did a good job covering all this stuff. I certainly do want to take this opportunity to thank every single one of you for your service. I know I appreciate it very much, and I thank you for that, growing up in a military family. And if you have any other questions for me, you can ask me. I will personally be in touch with you guys following up after, not tonight, but just like after this event in general, just to kind of do a follow-up. We'll have a copy of this recording. I'll email you a link to that so that you can check it out, watch it. I still owe the people from the very last session their links, so I'll probably have all of those coming out next week sometime. If anybody wants, they can always go back and check out some of our past episodes that we've done. There's a really good conversation about, like I said earlier, just addiction in general, homelessness. I mean, so many of the topics that we've talked about previously as one topic has been brought up in this particular conversation. And I think that that in and of itself is very eye-opening, and people should kind of think about that a little bit. You know, we just squeezed like 6 topics into veterans with PTSD, right? We talked about homelessness, stigmatization, mental health problems, medical barriers, family relation problems, addiction. I mean, there's been so many things that we talked about this evening. And I really appreciate all of you being willing to share your stories with us and share your insights with us. And I thank you all for being here this evening.
Thank you for having us. Definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It was fun.
I'm glad you were able to make it on, Andy.
I was in the lobby.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.